The Mind Thief, and the Sentence for Madness. Imagine waking up in your multi-million-dollar penthouse. But you don't recognize the woman sleeping next to you. You check your phone, and your signature is on a contract you never signed. You think you're losing your mind. But the truth is much more terrifying. You aren't sick. You are being erased. Welcome to the cold-blooded world of Arthur Sterling, and the man who stole his reality. Part 1. The Architect of Shadows. In the heart of New York City, where the skyscrapers of the Sterling Group pierce the clouds, Arthur Sterling was a god, a visionary CEO who built an empire on logic, data, and an iron will. But every god has a shadow. For Arthur, that shadow was Marcus. Marcus wasn't just a co-founder, he was the ghost of Sterling. While Arthur stood in the spotlight, Marcus moved in the silence of the server rooms and the margins of the legal briefs. He was the man who cleaned up the messes, the one who knew where every body and every secret was buried. The plan didn't start with a bang. It started with a single comma. One night, while working on a $500 million merger, Arthur noticed a discrepancy in the final draft, a clause that seemed to hand over significant voting power to an offshore entity. He called Marcus into his office, his voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and confusion. "Marcus, I didn't authorize this change. Did the legal team mess up the version control again?" Marcus leaned against the mahogany desk, his silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the cold blue light of the monitors. He didn't blink. He didn't look surprised. He simply pulled up the previous evening's security footage on his tablet. There, on the screen, was Arthur. He was sitting at his desk at 3 a.m., typing fervently, signing the digital document with his biometric thumbprint, and then staring blankly into the camera for 60 seconds before leaving. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. I don't remember this. I was at home. I remember being at home with Sarah." "Arthur," Marcus said, his voice a soothing, low-frequency hum, "you've been working 20-hour days for 6 months. Stress does strange things to the hippocampus. Maybe we should cancel the gala tonight. You need rest." But Arthur didn't need rest. He needed the truth. What he didn't know was that the video he just watched was a deepfake, rendered in real time by a private server Marcus had installed in the basement. The biometric thumbprint was a silicone mold Marcus had lifted from a wine glass. The gaslighting of a titan had begun. Part 2. The Ghost in the Penthouse. Gaslighting is not about making someone believe a lie, it's about making them doubt their own senses. For the next 3 weeks, Marcus turned Arthur's $20 million Manhattan penthouse into a psychological labyrinth. It started with the smells. Arthur would walk into his kitchen, and the scent of burnt toast would be overwhelming. But when he asked Sarah, his fiancée, she would look at him with a mixture of pity and concern. "Arthur, there's no smell. I haven't even used the toaster today." Marcus had installed micro-scent dispensers in the HVAC vents, controlled remotely from his smartphone. Each scent was calculated to trigger a specific neurological response: confusion, anxiety, or olfactory hallucinations, a classic early sign of schizophrenia. But Marcus didn't stop at the air. He attacked the physical world. One evening, Arthur found a prescription bottle on his nightstand for clozapine, a heavy-duty antipsychotic. The label had his name on it, prescribed by a Dr. Aris Thorne. Arthur didn't know a Dr. Thorne. He called the number on the bottle. A professional-sounding receptionist answered, "Thorne Psychiatric. How can I help you? Mr. Sterling? Are you calling about your 4 p.m. appointment tomorrow?" Arthur hung up, his hands shaking. He checked his digital calendar. There it was, in his own handwriting style. 4 p.m., Dr. Thorne. He didn't remember writing it. He didn't remember the appointment. He began to feel like a passenger in his own body, watching a stranger live his life. At the office, Marcus was the perfect confidant. He began cleaning up Arthur's mistakes in front of the board members, subtly hinting that Arthur's genius was being consumed by a hereditary condition. He showed Arthur emails that Arthur supposedly sent, aggressive, nonsensical rants to major investors. In reality, Marcus had used an AI LLM, large language model, trained on Arthur's writing style to generate them. "The mind is a fragile glass. Arthur," Marcus whispered during a private late-night session. Once it cracks, the light gets in, but so does the cold. Let me handle the Sterling Vance merger. You just focus on getting better. Arthur looked at his partner. Seeing a savior, he didn't see the man who was systematically replacing his reality with a scripted nightmare. Part 3. The Puppet Master's Sonata. Sound is the most direct path to the subconscious. Marcus knew that if he could control what Arthur heard, he could control what Arthur believed. He began a technique known as infrasonic priming, using the high-end Sonos system integrated into the Sterling office and penthouse. Marcus played low-frequency sounds, below the threshold of human hearing. Around 17 Hz, these frequencies are known to induce extreme physiological discomfort, a sense of dread, and even blurred vision. To Arthur, the world began to feel thin. During important board meetings, he would suddenly feel a wave of inexplicable terror, his heart racing as if a predator were in the room. He would look around, but everyone else seemed calm. Marcus would catch his eye and give a micro nod of concern. A silent signal that said, "It's happening again, Arthur." Then came the sonata. Marcus hired a professional Foley artist to record hyper-realistic sounds of scratching inside the walls and the faint, distorted voice of Arthur's deceased father. These clips were hidden within white noise generators and played at 3 a.m. When Arthur woke up, drenched in sweat, hearing his father's voice calling him a disappointment and a failure, he would rush to Sarah. But Sarah, who had been secretly put on Marcus's payroll with the promise of a life of luxury after Arthur's retirement, would simply rub his back and whisper, "There's no sound, honey. It was just another nightmare." The psychological erosion reached its peak during the mirror incident. Marcus replaced the smart mirror in Arthur's bathroom with a high-definition OLED screen. For a split second, when Arthur looked at his reflection, the image would lag by half a second, or his reflection's eyes would blink when his didn't. It was subtle enough to be dismissed as a glitch, but frequent enough to shatter Arthur's trust in his own eyes. "I think I need to step down, Marcus," Arthur sobbed one evening in the dimly lit CEO office. "I'm seeing things. I'm hearing the dead, the Sterling legacy. I'm destroying it." Marcus walked over, placing a heavy, grounding hand on Arthur's shoulder. "You aren't destroying it, Arthur. You're just handing the baton to someone who can protect it while you're in the dark. I've prepared the power of attorney documents. It's for your own safety." Arthur signed. He didn't just sign away a company, he signed away his identity. The puppet master had successfully severed the strings of the man's soul. Part 4. The Sterile Prison. The signature on the power of attorney was the final nail in the coffin of Arthur's freedom. Within 48 hours, under the guise of a discreet medical intervention, Marcus moved Arthur to the Haven, a private, high-tech sanitarium in upstate New York. On paper, it was a world-class facility for executive burnout. In reality, every brick and every nurse belonged to Marcus. The walls were painted a specific shade of passive white, a clinical color designed to induce sensory deprivation over long periods. In the Haven, time ceased to exist. There were no windows, only LED panels that simulated the sun. But Marcus programmed them to run on a 26-hour cycle. Arthur's circadian rhythms shattered. He would eat breakfast when it was midnight outside and sleep when the city was buzzing with life. His only link to the outside world was a tablet pre-loaded with news, curated by Marcus. The headlines were devastating. Sterling Group stocks soar after CEO steps down, and Arthur Sterling's family issues statement on his rapid mental decline. Marcus visited once a week, always dressed in his charcoal suit, looking like the picture of health and success. He would sit across from a hollow-eyed Arthur and present him with evidence of his madness. "You attacked Sarah last night, Arthur," Marcus would say, his voice thick with rehearsed grief. "The doctors had to sedate you. Do you remember?" I would never hurt her," Arthur whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. "The footage says otherwise," Marcus replied, sliding a tablet across the table. The video showed a man who looked exactly like Arthur, deepfaked onto a security guard's body, shouting incoherently and lunging at a crying Sarah. Arthur watched in horror as his own image committed acts of violence he had no memory of. "This is the ultimate sentence for madness," being forced to witness a version of yourself that you despise. Until you accept that your true self is dead. The medication continued, a steady drip of benzodiazepines mixed with subtle hallucinogens. Arthur wasn't being cured, he was being chemically lobotomized. Marcus would watch the monitors from the hallway, a faint, robotic smile touching his lips. He wasn't just stealing a fortune, he was conducting a masterpiece of human deconstruction. Part 5. The Mirror's Betrayal. In the isolation of the Haven, the most dangerous enemy Arthur faced was his own reflection. Marcus understood a fundamental psychological truth. When a man can no longer trust his own eyes, his soul begins to dissolve. The smart mirrors Marcus had installed in Arthur's private suite were the ultimate tools of cognitive distortion. They weren't just mirrors. They were liquid crystal displays backed by a sophisticated AI engine that monitored Arthur's facial expressions in real time. At first, the changes were microscopic. Arthur would look at himself while brushing his teeth, and for a fleeting second, his reflection would sneer, a cruel, jagged expression that Arthur hadn't made. He would blink, and it was gone. "Did I just?" he would whisper, touching his cold skin. But the AI was relentless. As the days bled into weeks, the reflection began to act independently. Arthur would stand perfectly still, but in the mirror, his double would slowly reach up and claw at its own throat. Or its eyes would turn a pitch black, void like void. Marcus orchestrated these glitches to coincide with Arthur's medication peaks. This created a permanent state of prosopagnosia, the inability to recognize faces, including his own. One evening, Marcus entered the room to find Arthur huddling in the corner, having covered every reflective surface with bedsheets. "Why are you hiding, Arthur?" Marcus asked, his voice calm, almost clinical. "The man in the glass, he's not me," Arthur whimpered. "He's a monster. He's the one who hurt Sarah. He's the one who signed those papers." Marcus knelt beside him, holding up a small, silver hand mirror. "No, Arthur. The man in the glass is the real you. The person you thought you were, the CEO, the hero. That was just a mask. This sickness has simply stripped the mask away. You aren't losing your mind. You are finally seeing the darkness you've carried since the beginning." This was the masterstroke. Marcus wasn't just making Arthur think he was crazy, he was making him believe that his insanity was his true nature. He was gaslighting Arthur's very morality. By the time Marcus left the room, Arthur was staring into the small mirror, tears streaming down his face, apologizing to a monster that didn't exist. He was no longer a victim fighting a conspiracy, he was a sinner accepting a sentence. Part 6. The Erasure of Sarah. To fully consume a man's world, you must eliminate the witnesses of his former glory. Sarah was the last witness. But Marcus didn't kill her, that would be too messy. Instead, he made her a ghost. For weeks, Arthur's requests to see her were met with the same cold, rehearsed response from the nursing staff. "Miss Sarah came to visit you yesterday." "Mr. Sterling, you don't remember?" They would then show him logs, falsified digital records, of her checking in and out. Marcus even played audio recordings through the room's speakers while Arthur was in a drug-induced stupor. Sarah's voice, crying, saying she couldn't handle the violence anymore, that she was afraid of him. It was a masterpiece of audio engineering using AI voice cloning. Arthur began to grieve for a relationship that was being murdered in real time by a computer algorithm. The reality was far darker. Marcus had moved Sarah into a separate luxury villa in the Hamptons, convincing her that Arthur's condition was terminal and highly aggressive. He fed her the same deepfaked videos of Arthur's attacks. To Sarah, Arthur was gone, replaced by a raving lunatic. To Arthur, Sarah had abandoned him because of the monster he saw in the mirror. One rainy Tuesday, Marcus brought a final document to the Haven. "Sarah is moving on, Arthur. She's signed a non-disclosure agreement and moved to Europe. She sent this." He handed Arthur a single, handwritten note. It said, "I can't look at you anymore. Please, stay away from me." It was a perfect forgery, mimicking Sarah's unique cursive. As Arthur clutched the paper, his last anchor to reality snapped. The isolation was now complete. He was no longer Arthur Sterling, the billionaire. He was a nameless patient in a white room. Hated by the world and abandoned by love, Marcus watched the man's spirit finally break. The light in Arthur's blue eyes extinguishing like a dying star. The mind thief had cleared the board. Now, it was time to claim the prize. Part 7. The Corporate Takeover. With Arthur neutralized, the Sterling Group was a kingdom without a king. But Marcus didn't just want to lead, he wanted to own. He orchestrated a special emergency session of the board of directors. The setting was the top-floor conference room, the very place where Arthur had once commanded respect. Marcus arrived, not as a subordinate, but as the sole bearer of Arthur's proxy. He presented a curated narrative of disaster. Using AI-generated financial reports, Marcus showed the board a looming bankruptcy, a hidden debt, supposedly created by Arthur's erratic, drug-fueled decisions during his secret mental decline. The directors, terrified of losing their fortunes, looked to Marcus for a solution. Arthur's brilliance has become our greatest liability, Marcus said, his voice echoing with calculated authority. The markets are beginning to smell the blood. If we don't act now, the Sterling Group will be dismantled by federal regulators within 90 days. Then, he offered the lifeboat, a complex restructuring plan where a newly formed holding company, Acheron Capital, would inject billions in liquidity in exchange for a 51% controlling interest. What the board didn't know, and what the layers of shell companies concealed, was that Marcus was Acheron Capital. He had been skimming offshore accounts for a decade, waiting for this exact moment to buy the company with its own stolen money. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. The board members felt they were being saved. In reality, they were handing the keys to the fox who had already hollowed out the henhouse. By sunset, Marcus sat in the CEO's leather chair. He looked at the family portrait of Arthur's father on the wall and pressed a button. The portrait retracted into the ceiling, replaced by a minimalist, black and white abstract painting. The Sterling legacy was dead. The era of the shadow had begun. Part 8. The glitch in the machine. For Marcus, perfection was the only acceptable standard. His empire was built on the precision of algorithms and the total control of information. But reality has a way of leaking through the tightest seals. It began as a series of digital anomalies. While Marcus was reviewing the quarterly projections in his new office, the primary monitor flickered. For a millisecond, the stock tickers were replaced by a live feed of Arthur's room at the Haven. Marcus froze. He saw Arthur sitting motionless, staring directly into the camera. Arthur's lips moved, but there was no sound. Marcus checked the system logs. There was no record of a camera feed being opened. A ghost in the code, he muttered, dismissing it as a byproduct of the complex surveillance software he'd used to destroy his friend. But the glitches escalated. In the middle of a high-stakes video call with European investors, Marcus's voice-changing software, the one he used to impersonate Arthur for bank authorizations, malfunctioned. Instead of Arthur's confident baritone, the speakers emitted a distorted, high-pitched screech that sounded like a man drowning. The investors stared in confusion. Marcus recovered with a smooth lie about satellite interference. But the sweat on his brow was real. Deep within the Sterling Group's mainframe, something was fighting back. Arthur, in his moments of lucidity before the drugs took hold, had been a world-class coder. Years ago, as a fail-safe against corporate espionage, Arthur had hidden a dormant AI protocol, a dead man's switch, buried in the kernel of the company's operating system. It was designed to trigger if Arthur didn't input a specific biometric sequence for 30 days. Marcus, in his haste to seize power, had bypassed the security protocols but hadn't erased them. Now, the switch was waking up. It began sending encrypted files to an anonymous recipient. It started subtle, deleting small amounts of Acheron Capital's capital. Marcus realized with a jolt of cold terror that while he had stolen Arthur's mind, he had forgotten to kill Arthur's ghost inside the machine. The hunter was beginning to feel the first chill of becoming the prey. Part 9. The Unexpected Alley. The recipient of the encrypted files was not a federal agent or a rival billionaire. It was Sarah. Marcus had made a fatal error in his calculations. He underestimated the persistence of human intuition. In her isolation in the Hamptons, Sarah had spent weeks re-watching the videos Marcus sent her. Something didn't align. Arthur, in his supposed fits of madness, would often tap his fingers against his thigh in a rhythmic pattern. To a stranger, it looked like a nervous tick. To Sarah, it was Morse code. Arthur had been a hobbyist ham radio operator in his youth. The message hidden in the violent video was simple: MARCUS. SOS. Just as she was beginning to doubt the narrative Marcus had spun, her laptop pinged. A massive data dump appeared on her screen, bypassing her firewall with surgical precision. It contained the blueprints for the scent dispensers, the source code for the deepfake software, and the financial trail of Acheron Capital. Arthur's dead man's switch had found its destination. But Sarah was under 24/7 surveillance by Marcus's security team. She couldn't call the police. The local precinct was on the Sterling payroll. She needed someone with inside access. Someone Marcus trusted implicitly. She thought of Julian, the young, silent assistant who always stood at Marcus's door. The same young man who had once been Arthur's protege before Marcus re-educated him. Sarah took a desperate gamble. Using a hidden burner phone, she sent Julian a single image, the original, unedited photo of Arthur and Julian at the company's founding, before Marcus had photoshopped himself into the legacy. Beneath it, she wrote, "The mirror is lying. Help him." The next morning, Julian walked into Marcus's office to deliver his coffee. His expression remained robotic, his movements precise, but as he set the cup down, his eyes lingered for a fraction of a second on the Black Knight chess piece sitting on the desk. He remembered Arthur teaching him the Knight's Tour when he was just an intern. He remembered the man Arthur used to be. The cycle was beginning to break. Marcus looked up, sensing a shift in the air. "Is something wrong, Julian?" "No, sir," Julian replied, his voice a perfect monotone. "Everything is exactly as you programmed it." Part 10. The Night of Reawakening. Midnight at the Haven was usually the hour of deepest despair. But tonight, the air felt electric. In his white cage, Arthur lay on his bed, his mind a foggy swamp of benzodiazepines. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered, not the artificial sun, but a sharp, rhythmic strobe. It was the Knight's Tour sequence in light. Julian had breached the facility's control system from the Sterling mainframe. He couldn't disable the guards, but he could talk to Arthur's subconscious. Through the room's speakers, instead of the low-frequency dread, came a high-frequency acoustic pulse designed to neutralize the effects of the sedatives, a technique Arthur himself had researched for cognitive recovery. Arthur's eyes snapped open, for the first time in months. The fog didn't just drift, it burned away. He sat up, his limbs heavy but his will returning. On the wall, the projector, usually reserved for Marcus's deepfakes, displayed a single folder icon labeled Reality X. Arthur stumbled toward the wall, his trembling hand touching the projection. A video began to play. It wasn't a deepfake. It was a recording Julian had made secretly in Marcus's office. Marcus laughing as he practiced Arthur's signature. Marcus talking to the scent dispenser technician. Marcus admitting Sarah was safe and that the violence was a lie. "I'm not crazy," Arthur whispered, the words tearing at his throat. The realization was a violent rebirth. The monster in the mirror was a ghost, and the man holding the mirror was the true demon. At that moment, the door to the suite hissed open. Julian's face appeared on the security monitor in the room. "Sir, you have 20 minutes before the guards realize the server room is on a loop. There is a black SUV waiting at the service entrance. Sarah is already on her way to the city." Arthur didn't ask questions. He looked at his reflection in the smart mirror, the one that used to sneer at him. Julian had hacked the AI, now. It showed Arthur as he truly was, tired, thin, but dangerously focused. He shattered the mirror with a chair, grabbed a jagged piece of glass, and stepped into the hallway. The CEO had returned, not to reclaim his company, but to hunt the man who had stolen his soul. Part 11. The Final Checkmate. Marcus sat in the CEO's office, swirling a glass of expensive scotch. The city below was his. The legacy was his. He felt untouchable. But then, the heavy oak doors creaked open. He didn't look up, assuming it was Julian. Did you finish the transfer of the remaining offshore assets, Julian? The transfer is complete, Marcus, but the destination has changed. Marcus froze. That wasn't Julian's voice. It was a voice he thought he had buried under layers of chemical fog and digital lies. He turned slowly. Arthur Sterling stood in the doorway. He was gaunt. His suit hung loose on his frame, and his eyes were sunken, but they were burning with a terrifying, lucid coldness. Arthur, Marcus gasped, his composure slipping for the first time. How did you? You're supposed to be in recovery. You're having a relapse. Guards. The guards are watching a loop of an empty hallway. Marcus, Arthur said, stepping into the room, the same way you made me watch a loop of a life that wasn't mine. Marcus tried to reach for the silent alarm under his desk, but Arthur tossed a jagged shard of the broken, smart mirror onto the mahogany surface. I wouldn't. Julian has already handed the raw server data, the scent dispenser schematics, and your internal memos to the FBI. They're in the lobby right now. Marcus's face contorted. The mask of the sophisticated strategist shattered, revealing the desperate rat underneath. You have no proof. Everything has your signature on it. Your thumbprint. Your face is on every camera. That was your mistake, Marcus, Arthur whispered, leaning over the desk. You built a world of shadows. But you forgot that shadows can't exist without a light. I didn't just come back for the company. I came back to show you the sentence for madness. Arthur pressed a key on the laptop. On the massive wall monitors. The news was already breaking. But it wasn't about Arthur's insanity. It was a live broadcast of Marcus's private confession to Julian, recorded only minutes ago, where Marcus gloated about the deepfakes. Arthur had lured Marcus into a final trap of arrogance. The Black Knight was off the board. Checkmate. Part 12. The Sentence for Madness. As the FBI stormed the office, Marcus didn't scream or fight. He simply started laughing, a dry, hacking sound. You think you won, Arthur? You're back in the chair. But look at you. You don't know what's real. Every time a light flickers, every time you smell toast, you'll wonder if I'm still in your head. Marcus was led away in handcuffs. But his parting gift was the permanent destruction of Arthur's peace. 6 months later, the Sterling Group had stabilized. But the man at the helm was a ghost. Arthur sat in his office. The same view of Manhattan before him. Sarah was there, her hand on his shoulder. But he often flinched when she touched him. He had dismantled every smart device in his life. He worked only on paper, with analog clocks and mechanical locks. He had reclaimed his fortune. But Marcus had successfully stolen his ability to trust the world. This story illustrates the terrifying power of perceptual identity theft. Marcus didn't just steal money. He attacked the categorical imperative of Arthur's mind, the basic framework we use to distinguish truth from falsehood. Even when the gaslighter is gone, the internalized aggressor remains. Arthur's hypervigilance is a form of permanent psychological scarring known as post-traumatic gaslighting syndrome. The ultimate victory of a manipulator is not in taking what you own, but in making you complicit in your own destruction. The sentence for madness wasn't for Marcus. It was the life of doubt Arthur had to live from that day forward. Protect your reality, for once it is breached, no amount of money can buy back the feeling of being sane. The story of Arthur Sterling isn't just about a stolen company. It's a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human mind. Marcus didn't need a weapon to destroy Arthur. He only needed to control the narrative. In a world of deepfakes, AI, and digital manipulation, the most valuable thing you own isn't your bank account, it's your grip on reality. Once someone else holds the pen to your life story, you've already lost. Arthur got his throne back, but he lost his peace forever. Because in the game of shadows, even when the lights come back on, the monsters you were forced to see in the dark stay with you. What would you do if you realized your own senses were lying to you? Could you spot a Marcus in your own life before it's too late? Let us know in the comments below. If this psychological journey chilled you to the bone, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the darkest corners of the human psyche. Thank you for watching The Mind Thief and the Sentence for Madness. Stay vigilant, trust your intuition, and remember, Not everything you see is real. I'm your narrator, and I'll see you in the next shadows. Goodbye.